So that's what I'm saying. The text is like an object. It's gonna change perspective based on where you're standing. I don't know.
Hello?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I missed you, baby sweet. It was a day.
It was a day.
Please tell me you're seeing this too.
From Seattle, we're Drinking the Movies. I'm Taylor Baker.
And I'm Michael Clausen.
Hey, Taylor.
Oh, hey, Michael.
How's it going?
Good. This is our first film festival discussion in a while.
That's right. We're talking about South by Southwest 2021 today.
Yeah. You were going through a move during Sundance, which was our last big festival that we had the opportunity to cover. And then before that, was it New York Film Festival? Was that the last one? Couldn't have been the last
Getting
one.
the order mixed up now. I don't
No, we did
remember.
Heartland and San Diego and
Fantasia. Right?
Fantasia was August. But I'm talking about the most recent. I think the most recent would have been Heartland. We did like a couple festivals in one episode. We did Heartland, we did San Diego, and double Exposure International Film Festival, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah.
And that's where we covered The Outside Story, if you remember that episode.
That's COVID talking, where the order of these has just become a little jumbled in my
almost
memory.
Inconsequential.
Yeah. We're just talking about 3 titles today. Do you have thoughts on the festival overall, South by Southwest at large?
Not too nice of thoughts. I mean, you know, it's an interesting platform they have. It could have allowed for great networking. It could have allowed for a lot better communication. But basically, it took like at least 3 or 4 days of using it every day to get acclimated to what the hell is happening on that platform. It's really hard to search. You have to find out which day something's on after you search for it. And then even if you're registered for something, you often get a graphic error that says that this content can't be played, which makes no sense. But I mean, it's interesting to see how they're trying to adapt. It's interesting to see a multi-format festival, since we've mainly covered film festivals. This had comedy and music, which I didn't get too much the first few days. I did spend some time with comedy and music yesterday. I found something, I think it was like Channel 2, which had the island stage for like 3 hours. And I just found individual after individual that I loved on that stage. 2 of the female singers that I loved are Khalifa and Savannah, which I'd never heard before, either of them. And then there was another guy that was like hosting a stage on a different channel, but I really liked his rap set, and that guy's name is Kosha Dills. But he just did like, you know, very like stripped back rap set. And then for stand-up, I probably saw 20 stand-ups, and about 15 of them were very clearly washed. Like this was not a good first set for them to come back to. But there were 2, I think both of them are writers, and both are self-deprecating, so they were able to kind of internalize and process the comedy very fluently, even though they didn't really have a crowd to react off of, which is normally the problem. And those 2 stand-ups are Chloe Radcliffe and Michael Early. And they were very good storytellers, and they made me chuckle a few times.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, coming into this one, I was thinking a little bit about how there was I don't think there was any festival or maybe even like large-scale event that was blindsided quite as hard as South by Southwest was last year when COVID hit, and it was within like a week of the festival starting that they had to cancel. And imagining just like the tens of thousands of people who had already bought tickets, built their schedules, only to have it canceled, and just how devastating that is. It's kind of remarkable to be lapping it now. So on one hand, like no festival has had more time to prepare for their next go at it virtually, but they also have a year's worth of people not really being able to film like they ordinarily would because of pandemic circumstances and social distancing and all that. It's just kind of an interesting context for the festival this year. it's always seemed to me like one of the festivals with one of the blurriest identities, just because from a film standpoint, just because film is only one pillar of the festival at large. And it's only gotten funkier as I was thinking about it this year, because as a general consumer, the only way to engage with it was with like the one pass. It was like $400 for everything or nothing.
Mm-hmm. They don't sell any individual tickets. There's no way for a filmmaker to make a profit at this festival. And you can register for something, watch it, and then unregister for it, and then someone else gets to use their pass to watch that slot, and the filmmaker will get no compensation.
Yeah.
It makes zero sense.
Yeah. Interesting details. And that price tag just feels like prohibitively expensive to me.
After watching what I watched, absolutely.
Yeah, and you wonder, you know, like, when you're experiencing these at home, you kind of have to like step back and think like, what are these festivals even for? When the experience at that point is no different from what people can access 2 clicks away on any other streaming service. And you know, when I think about festivals existing to kind of elevate cinema as an art form, I don't know that I love how South by Southwest can be marketed as like a media event and a networking opportunity, that I think sometimes maybe devalues these in some way as a work of art. But I don't know. It's a very unique festival just because it has all these other components to it. But we'll just concentrate on the art itself today.
Yeah. Well, I mean, before we concentrate on the art, I just have to echo, like, we went to all these other film festivals. They had good, if not great, titles. By and large, Fantasia had a couple films that made my top 20 in special actors and the Labyrinth of Cinema. There's, you know, and that's like a tiny little genre type of a festival. VIFF, excellent lineup. NYFF, excellent lineup. Sundance had a great lineup of titles and incredible directorial debuts. South by Southwest is like, it's not the bottom of the barrel, but it feels pretty close to it when you're watching all these directorial debuts that are like they're fine. They're not terrible, but they're like, you know, in that, if we're going out of 136 to 55, 56 range. And they have these, you know, the special nights or whatever, where like every single film that's got a special thing with a limited amount of people that can watch it is a film that already has distribution that is only there for the badge so that they can market more effectively. Like it's a totally disingenuous presentation and interaction of the art itself at face value. Like it's very much just a commercial event in a way that Sundance, New York Film Festival, VIFF did not feel that way. So it's really rubbed me the wrong way at a lot of different levels, but most importantly is like the level of art it's bringing.
Yeah, we're not talking about any of the headliners today, but I think there were 3, and they were all music related, right? There was Tom Petty, Demi Lovato. That's maybe not. I haven't seen it. It sounds like that's not quite as much about her music per se, but
it's like propaganda. That's what it's like. It's a 4-episode docu-series from YouTube that's already had a release date and then was put in, and it just, if you watch it, it just feels absolutely like propaganda. And if you're familiar with Scooter Braun, it feels like propaganda for Scooter Braun because he's the hero of the documentary. And he's also the executive producer, and he also owns like all the masters for Demi Lovato's new recordings. And in the first episode particularly, they say that they're going to tell us the whole truth, and then they also in the same sentence tell us that we'll never know the truth because the documentary that they shot while she was bottoming out will never be released. So they're telling you 2 different realities at the same exact time, and there's so many problems with it. And if you like Taylor Swift at all, you have to hate Scooter Braun. Those are the rules.
So there you go, folks. We ended up a little bit covering a headliner, actually. But yeah, it's interesting that they just leaned into the like music film crossover with the headliners this year. And it's interesting, like if you look back at like previous years at what's been what has headlined before, it's been, much more prominent titles. They had the Beach Bum one year. I think Linklater notoriously releases his stuff there as a, hometown Austin guy. Us was premiering there.
They had
Support the Girls, one of our favorites.
They had the one before Beach Bum too, right? Spring Breakers.
Oh yeah. So looking at those, it's almost kind of like, what happened this year? It kind of feels like the programming was maybe a little bit lackluster.
Well, I think that it's probably largely due to the fact that no filmmaker can make any money at this festival, and that they're out of money even if they get accepted.
Yeah, not great.
But on that positive note,
we got movies. We will concentrate on the art. Yeah.
Let's get to first impressions of a couple titles. We've got Oxygen and Every Breath You Take. Let's get to Oxygen first.
Phew. Pourquoi je me souviens de rien? Dans son souffle, dans ses bretelles. Qui suis-je? Qu'est-ce que vous me cachez? Allô?
All right, Michael, that was the trailer for Oxygen, starring Melanie Laurent. What do you think about that one?
Well, it was a pretty quick trailer, just under a tight 60 seconds. I am a big Melanie Laurent fan. We've seen movies like this before, where someone's stuck in a box or coffin or some device, buried. I think it's the only. That's maybe the only one that I've seen. But
Buried the Guilty, Lock with Tom Hardy.
The one character shows. It's a little hard to say from the trailer alone what this is doing differently from anything that has come before it. But I don't know. It's a coin toss, to be honest. I don't know if this will be any good or not. What about you?
I'm not gonna watch it.
Hard pass.
It's subtitles. Number one.
Ooh.
It is already okay, I need to be interested if you're gonna make me read the whole time, because that means that I can't do a background movie. I can't do laundry while I'm watching, and this is definitely a laundry movie for me. This is not something that I'm deeply engaged by. I did not like what I saw out of the visuals as far as the digital graphic effects. It did not look good. Aha is already on my I don't trust you list with Crawl, and this did nothing to assuage my fears. And I mean, since it's Netflix, it'll probably have a dub version, but I can't imagine I would click on that rather than watch The Wire or something else that I'm trying to do. It's just in the world of watching all the classic films we are and all the other content there is, there's no way I'm going to make time for this. Not a fucking chance.
I think the conversation about Oxygen ends here.
All right. On to Every Breath You Take.
Dr. Clark, my best friend.
She's dead.
Where are you?
Somebody hit her with a car.
Daphne, listen to me.
I know what you're afraid of.
I'm not like that anymore.
Stay where you are. Oh my God.
Her phone had you listed as the doctor to call in case of emergency.
Hey, okay. Where's my sister? I just want to go see her. Is she okay? Is she okay? Try to calm down. Daphne! Take a breath.
All right, that was the trailer for Every Breath You Take. What are your thoughts on this one?
It's a lot more intriguing than the last film. I'll give it that. It's always interesting when I see a movie that was, scrapped together from 12 different financiers, or so that intro indicated, where it's this financing company, this production company, etc. But Casey Affleck is the star. Casey Affleck, I believe, is executive producing. He's got a really good eye for stories. I don't know that this is kind of one of those where I'm a little bit tired of this genre of the dead wife or sister and then the other person that knows what happened and is, manipulating the doctor. It's kind of an old trite story, but I really like Casey. India Isley, who everybody knows I absolutely love. Also has at least a small role in this film. Michelle Moynihan is a talent. So I'm definitely willing to give this one a shot. I could end up really responding to it, but I almost can't tell from the trailer. Like, I like some of the moments where there's like that dead guy on the floor with the scissors, but then I also don't like the awkward confrontation melodrama that was happening between the two male characters there.
Yeah, I think I'm mostly with you on this one. I'm kind of on the fence. I mean, well, I should say that I didn't even know this movie existed until like 10 minutes ago when we were deciding what to do first impressions of. But Casey Affleck alone intrigues me. We don't see him in that many movies.
He just executive produced The World to Come, Vanessa Kirby, Rebecca Ferguson. Really great film.
Yeah. The director is Yvonne Stein, whose last film was the Terminal, the Margot Robbie one. Which
I'm worried.
Dude, I understand did not do so hot.
Yeah, that's true, but also like it just wasn't good.
Yeah, I did not see that one myself, but that is what I've heard. I can't really tell if this looks good or if this looks like just kind of studio potboiler. I really can't decide, but
it's like it's an interesting screenplay, but we'll see how it pans out.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of that like a medium budget adult fare that you always hear is just, you know, the thing that's evaporating from theaters, but it looks like it is in fact going to theaters. Like, I just kind of like that it exists, even though I'm maybe cautiously optimistic about it. Put it that way.
Yeah, I like that it exists because if it's good and it does well, that's great. If it's bad and it does badly, then they'll know that that's bad. Don't do that again.
Yeah, all upside here.
Yes. All right, on to the South by Southwest titles. Let's start with Violation, Michael.
I miss you.
Do you?
Yeah, I miss what we used to be like.
That's when Dad started calling you my white knight.
Brainwashed her.
He just doesn't do everything you say anymore.
All right, Michael. Violation, one of my favorite films from Sundance. Stands to reason it's at a lower engagement title festival. It's still, you know, around my top film. You not so much. What qualms do you have with Violation? I guess, do you want to explain it to listeners first?
Yeah, start with a little synopsis of a sort. This Violation is directed by Dusty Mancinelli, along with Madeline Sims Fewer, co-directors. It's sort of a rape revenge thriller. We follow two different couples on this trip in the woods. We have Madeline Sims Fewer in our lead role. She's in a relationship, an unhappy relationship, I should say. She is on this trip with her sister and her sister's boyfriend or husband. I can't remember if they're married or not, actually. And as the formula in rape revenge movies go, a rape does occur in the movie, and this movie is playing with the tropes of that genre and that formula to a degree. Anything you want to add thus far?
I think you're right. I would just say that there's definitely more of a Dexter tone than other rape revenge thrillers go, and that this is, you know, like this is more about a clean kill than just a kill.
Yes, it is a drawn-out kill, for sure. It's told in kind of a jumbled timeline. It's told non-chronologically, which is something that I sort of admire about the movie. It was actually very refreshing when I realized that was happening. I was sort of just glad to see a little bit of a risk in festival fare when I didn't expect that. I don't think that totally works for me. I think there is I think the aspiration is for an effect similar to like what you get with Irreversible. Gaspar Noé's Irreversible. I think the chronology or the jumbled chronology just kind of baffled me a little bit more than it did intrigue me. How well did it work for you, that aspect of it?
I mean, the first time, because once you know what happens, it's a very different film to watch, and I did rewatch it for this discussion, but the first time I watched it, it was great because I was off kilter, but it was also the tone of the film was the most important thing from timeline to timeline, and you don't really know what the shift is. Like, you know that the shift happened, but you don't actually know where you are. And so you're carrying all the built-up propulsion and tension and tone from the previous scene into a different scene that is totally different within context of time or in place. And I really liked how they strung the strings together to make it kind of crescendo in certain points and then go down, and then you don't really expect something brutal to happen, and then we cut back to like slitting the throat open, and then you get this great scene where Madeline just begins gagging and pukes on a tarp, which doesn't sound like great acting, but she really delivers what I think is a stellar performance.
Yeah, it is a visceral performance for sure. There is quite a lot of visceral footage for sure. Yeah, I mean, I totally recognize that on second viewing they could snap together for me, the chronology. But yeah, I was almost just a little more perplexed by some, even just some of like the shorter images we get of sort of the post-transformation of our main character. I would argue that she does almost kind of undergo a transformation in this movie, as you would kind of expect, because rape is a transformative experience. I can only imagine. Sure, so is murder. But I think even the timeline aside, the maybe bigger issue for me is this kind of disconnect between the movie on one hand engaging in this kind of realism and this kind of atmospheric variety of realism, along with in other parts more pure genre, and I just don't think those two registers really snap together. I think there's sort of the pre-rape world where we're very much grounded in reality and seeing this relationship develop between our main character and the man who ultimately rapes her. And then the vengeance itself just feels so detached from reality for me in its extremity, that it just doesn't click with anything I feel like I had seen previously. Like, I just don't buy any of it. I think the extremity is a bug, not a feature for me. What about you?
Yeah, I had a totally different feeling about it, especially my first viewing. It's, I think, most importantly, to talk about the film, you have to talk about the sound design, which I think is like I don't know if it's a bug or a feature for you, but for me, it's the strongest feature of the film.
And many literal bugs in it too.
Yes.
Yes.
Did you respond to it before I move forward?
I think the sound design is interesting. Yeah.
So I especially leaned into, especially in my first viewing, really propulsive, really builds tone for someone. And then there's all these little things. You said something about like the drawn out kill earlier. At one point, Madeline Sims' favorite character literally puts a glass on a spider and you slowly watch it suffocate to death. There's tons of these shots that go to these nature shots that show animals or insects and kills. There's a scene of deboning a rabbit and the ripping of the flesh from the bones and the breaking of the bones. There's so much that does for me in the audible storytelling format, where her silence and her kind of matter-of-factness of going about this stuff, and then her physical revulsion kind of tells me that she's, like, she's a complex character. We don't really get to know the cookie-cutter version of this character. We just get to know that she's not a good person outside of the context of this, that she's been a terrible sister and like a bad person, that she's having a failing marriage. She's publicly embarrassing her husband in one scene, and like sharing confidential conversation that they had. And, I like that because she's a clumsy character. She's a human character that has flaws and then also goes and does these things. And in the context of the propulsiveness of the audio design and the way it was edited, and her performance, I really liked it. I don't feel like it leans heavily into genre personally. So I guess so that I can understand better what particulars felt like it was leaning into genre trope. Because especially the first time I watched it, it felt totally of itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think the extremity of the vengeance she exacts on her perpetrator is genre. I don't think that is grounded in reality. I don't buy that. I just don't buy that she was capable of that. For one, I think the extremity is purposeful insofar as it's for the sake of sort of subverting the usual trope where we see a character in rape revenge formulas. We see a character raped, then we see them have their revenge, and that's supposed to bring some catharsis. And this is more like, yeah, but maybe that vengeance could actually be so sickening in itself and so cumbersome and so arduous and just actually as nauseating. I just don't know that I find the point to be that interesting when it's so kind of detached from reality at that point. Like the original formula that it's subverting, like rape revenge is sort of a fantasy to begin with, where like we don't talk about that as like a thing that ever happens in the real world, women exacting revenge in violent ways. So to try to flip that on its head, you're just getting like so far away from like practical experience that I don't feel like it's revealing anything more to me about this character as she goes about what she does to her victim. I just say like, I'm not learning anything more about her as a character, and I think that doesn't serve its theme well about consequences and like the emotional consequences. I don't think it becomes any more complex, character-wise, if that makes sense.
It does. I think I just feel very differently about the genre to begin with. Let me just totally go in a different direction, because if we stay here, I'll need to think for like 5 minutes.
Understood.
And that's not fun to
Do
hear.
it.
That's
Pivot.
not fun to hear. So like in the beginning, there's this scene of confrontation where the sister says, if you're going to make me, or if you're going to make a scene or make me feel bad, then, you can go. If you want to help me, then you can help me by going and making me ice cream. And there's this great sound design at that point, and there's this really weird interaction happening between these characters, and I know that this movie's about a killer, and I'm confused on who she's going to kill because it's my first time watching it. And she's making ice cream when you make homemade ice cream, you can literally put anything in it. And at one point, as tension's building up in the audio, we cut as she's holding this glass jar. And I'd gone the entire film wondering, is she going to break that fucking glass and mix that shit in the ice cream? And I'm about to watch fucking everybody die Jonestown style from eating glass and bleeding out internally. Was that there for you at all?
It was more of a hindsight thing, and I do like where that ultimately goes. I don't think I had the same... I did not have the same prediction, but that was, if anything, more just like obliviousness on my part to where it was hinting it might go. And I do like where that detail ultimately goes.
Okay. So I know you don't like the process of the kill, but the thing that I really like is that she has to get up the ladder and then go install the wench, the automated wench, in order to string him up properly, so that she can bleed him. Like, I like that in the screenplay, there's all these little things that she has to do that, like, if it was a man, it would be a totally different kill scenario. But that she does it that way. The first time I watched it, I really liked the moment and the atmosphere and like the tension that was occurring from her freeing him as he was suffocating, and just like how tense that moment got. The second time around, I feel like I could have done without that. there's a different way that I would have probably rather seen that scene go, but you know, just framing it as like two first-time feature filmmakers in which you're a writer, a director, and starring in for Madeline. I don't know, I really, really like the original voice. I like what they did with the audio. I really like what they did with the naturalistic cinematography being edited in to evoke a tone that is coherent with the sound design, and that they framed the story so that you're not really sure how far this is going to go until the credits roll.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite scenes is where we see Madeline's character have this conversation with the perpetrator. I think they're in like a shed. They're sort of hidden in view from the other two characters.
Yeah, when she walks them for privacy, right?
Yeah, and they kind of have this conversation about what occurred the night before, and they start talking over each other. And I remember like so carefully trying to follow what each of them were saying as they start to talk over each other, because that dialogue is so meaningful in like perspective on the incident itself, and how, yeah, like I think that's like the most real kind of moment and revealing moment in the movie to me. And I think I could have used more of that kind of thing. I think the gruesomeness that the movie really leans into just doesn't tell me that much more about the repercussions of this incident on her. I think it's purely for the sake of playing with the trope, and I just don't think that has as much resonance for me. I kind of respect it, right? It's kind of it is a corrective to something we see a lot of, which is sort of just the gender reversed scenario, I guess. But I wish it spoke more to her. I don't know that you at that point, once she's carrying out those steps, I think we sort of lose her individuality in a way, like because it's so concentrated on the shock and awe of it, if that makes sense.
It does. My personal interpretation is that like the events, the rape and the murder, have like totally compromised her character. And so there is nothing to focus on because she's just the shadow of these decisions at this point. And that's kind of what that last scene is about, is like, you know, the first time I watched that, when she's looking around at everyone eating the ice cream, I'm like wondering, is this shit Jonestown? And then her sister puts her hand on her leg and it's like, is this a fucking happy ending? Like, I like that, you know, like she's someone who has PTSD and is in shock, and the feeling of not having an identity is literally coming through the screen to me, and like I don't know who she is right now. And she had these other moments where she tried to be honest and truthful, but because of her past history of being a shitty person, no one really took her seriously. And then she took really drastic measures, and you know, then there's like a weird happy ending in the midst of thinking that everyone can die from eating ice cream. I don't know. I really fucking like it.
Yeah. I mean, you talked about some of the visual details. I do like some of those little, I guess you call them kind of interludes, where we're just kind of getting footage of the landscape, the woods, shots of the lake. Yeah.
A wolf carrying.
That one, not so much. Some of that imagery, I think, was a little heavy-handed in its symbolism for me. I think I could have done less with the wolf and the rabbit, and kind of the predator-prey stuff. But I do think there was some interesting place setting in those shots and that cinematography.
I really like the lake, the boat on the lake in the middle of beginning the kill, or cleaning up the kill, or whatever happens, where she has to go outside and she's like, fuck, who's here? And then she looks down and there's just this boat and it pulls away. I really like that moment because there's like all this tension of what could happen, and then they just get rid of it, and it just kind of, it plays into how tense you are.
Yeah. Pivoting a little bit, the Madeline Sims character's boyfriend, or I guess he's actually her husband, right? I think they're married.
Yeah.
He feels a little bit like a non-character to me. I don't know that there is enough of him.
He's secondary.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I that feels like a little bit of a missed opportunity for me. Like, I would just be interested to see how this incident informs their relationship a bit more. I think it kind of does the morning after, but in a very brief sense. That felt a little thin, perhaps.
Yeah, I think that mainly your qualms here are like the absence of feeling like you know the human that she's playing. And that is best brought about by like interacting with other humans, which is something there's very little of, And I think I can agree with that. If that's your perspective, like I can agree that it doesn't do that. It's just that I didn't need that to begin with. I just kind of like the PTSD affect coming through the screen to me. I didn't like it in God, what was that movie with Joaquin Phoenix? The statue murders where he walks through the grass at the end into the mansion and kills everybody, and it's really boring to watch the kills.
You were never really here.
Yeah, right. Like I didn't respond to the PTSD there, but like here, I really do like how like she just is not a person. She's just someone like a ghost walking around in the world doing things. That goes a long way for me at some level.
I guess, but like I feel like the form of the movie kind of reflects that headspace. Like it is, I think, you could argue that jumbled chronology is speaking to this kind of confusion that you might experience with PTSD. But she also seems very methodical and focused to me in her when she goes about carrying out her vengeance. I mean, she is nauseated by it, but she actually seems like very lucid and determined and ferocious. I don't know that I would describe her as appearing sometimes as all that traumatized in a way. She actually seems incredibly determined and clear-headed in a way. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree that like that's there, but to me that's just like symptoms of things like shock and concussions and stuff like that. Where you're just like you're functioning, but you're not frontal lobing very much to yourself. You're just like doing the things. Mechanically, you're not really brooding on the reasoning behind it. You're just like doing the next objective.
Yeah. I do like that when we see the incident itself, you almost like don't even really kind of know what's going on at first. It's all kind of shot in like these super tight close-ups where I literally wasn't quite sure what was happening at first, and I think that's great. I think that was maybe the most immersive part of the experience for me, where she was quite literally disoriented and then suddenly realized what is happening to her. And I think that's very disturbing, whereas it's much more often depicted in rape can be depicted in a very violent manner, and this is a much more insidious kind of rape scene, I guess.
Yeah, I can agree with that for sure. Building on that, though, I guess maybe final moments here is the other thing that I really, really responded to was the handheld cinematography. I think that the camera movement here and just the light shake and the slow changes of angles really does a lot to make you feel like you could always see a little bit more, and like you're anticipating seeing whatever is going to come into frame with that next camera movement. I really liked that.
I like Madeline Sims' viewer quite a bit too. I mean, I do think that's kind of impressive to have directed and starred and written, and not feeling
and produced
vain in any way whatsoever. Quite the opposite. That's impressive.
This film is coming to Shudder this month. By the time this episode's released, it will have been out for a while, I think. So, is there any last thoughts here, or should we do favorite scene?
Let's do favorite scene. What do you have?
You're switching it back right around to me, are you? Right?
Well, I can go, but it's only because I think I've said it, which is that scene where our main character speaks with her perpetrator, and just the conflicting perspectives there. It just feels so true.
You mean
so
when you
true
said
to life.
Don't stop?
Did I say don't stop?
No. He says to her, when they're questioned later, that she said don't stop, and
it's one of the subtler ways in which the movie is, addressing gaslighting, very nicely. Yeah.
I'm gonna go with the final scene actually, which is just her and her sister on this porch, and there's so much that's happened, but there's simultaneously like no clarity on what their relationship really is. And the hand on her thigh and just the relationship that kind of is indicated there, or like the attempt at communication. It's one of the first times that the movie kind of goes back to being more human, and I really like that.
Coming soon to Shudder.
On to Stacey Gregg's Here Before.
Give a little time for the child within you. Don't be afraid to be young and free. Undo the locks and throw away the keys, and take off your shoes and socks and run you. La 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 la. Give a little time for the child within you. Don't be afraid to be young and free. Undo the locks and throw away the keys, and take off your shoes and socks and run you.
All right, Michael. This is a film that stars Andrea Riseborough, and was one of the most probably anticipated films coming into the festival by everyone. We've now seen it. I think we're both kind of in lockstep on its failings, and I hope in lockstep on Andrea Riseborough being awesome. What are your thoughts?
I think I have to be careful and not make this a boring review, because I think I will echo almost every point you have on this movie. But Violation was one that had been circulating other festivals. This was a premiere, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In the narrative competition of South by Southwest. I'm in complete agreement that I think Andrea Riseborough is probably the best thing about this movie.
Oh, I can't think of anything that could be better.
Word.
It would literally be a bad movie without her. So, yes, she's the best.
Care to describe the story a bit?
Yeah, she's a mom. She's married. It's unclear what the deal is with them. We'll get into that later. They have a son still. I'm trying not to mix my movies here. Yes, they have one son still, who did not pass away. We come to realize that she passed away from a car accident. And then some new neighbors move in. This is a multi-family home, so it's like 2 houses for each of them inside of a house. And their next door neighbor is a family that has a young daughter that's almost exactly their dead daughter's age. And Andrea Riseborough is precedingly gaslit and presented with the idea of there being a ghost and all sorts of weird, awkward things that don't really actually make cinematic sense as far as how the camera shows the story. And there's a big, really terrible denouement finale that is just like the stupidest thing that you could have done with this screenplay. Does that make sense? Did I get it?
I'm pretty much with you. Yeah, you're talking about the supernatural components. I do think the way this movie flirts with the supernatural up until this big final plot twist, which is not supernatural, but really just kind of sensational, is a very poor choice. It just feels like it's in poor taste. It feels very cheap, and kind of just...
And, like, totally unearned. Like, there had not been one moment of interaction with the dad and his daughter. So, to be clear, full spoilers, Andrea Riseborough's husband, who I'm calling the dad, and the daughter, who is the next door neighbor's daughter, is actually his daughter. It's very unclear what the deal is there. Were they married when he had, relations with that woman? Were they not? I don't understand whatever the hell is happening. And so Andrea Riseborough is not going crazy because that girl does actually look like her daughter because they have the same dad. And so she's not totally insane. And there's no glances between the dad and this daughter character or the dad and this neighbor wife character that actually make that storyline at all intriguing or interesting in any facet of beginning to be interesting at all. It's just so bad.
Yeah. I'm kind of disappointed by it because I think there was material that intrigued me, and I think I like this idea that Andrea Riseborough's character, this mother, is a woman who has kind of already processed her grief over her daughter's loss or her daughter's death, or at least managed it or suppressed it. And then
she's trying to move on.
Yeah, and she's doing a fairly good job from the looks of it. And then she has something that starts to dredge up these memories, and the idea that there are just triggers out there that can just poke at, what you thought you had buried, like it's a wound, and make until it starts to bleed again. I like that idea. I don't think you really need the supernatural component of the movie at all. I almost like the naturalistic version of this movie where the daughter just has the resemblances. You don't need any of the, like, reincarnation, another spoiler, sorry, woo-woo, that, like, just kind of distracts, I think, from the very thoughtful performance that Andrea Riseborough gives. I think this should have been, like, a straight drama in a way, and the genre elements don't add much.
I completely agree. So basically you're saying, like, if you take the elements of the screenplay and then you make a totally better screenplay with Andrea Riseborough, it's a better movie. And I think I can agree. Yeah,
if it's a bold idea.
Different story, it would be better.
Yeah, and I realize I'm getting dangerously close to just trying to, like, rewrite the movie here, but I think...
But you're not off track. It would make the movie better.
Yeah, I think I say that only because the theme of the story doesn't change. Like, the point here, I think the movie's emphasis is on Andrea Riseborough's grief, and it's trying to do the let's make a horror movie about grief thing when you don't really need the horror elements. Like, I think you just have the fact that your neighbor resembles someone you've lost, and how baffling that can be, that it feels like your daughter's back when she's not, and how awful that would feel. It's very weird how the camera just glances past a book at one point that just says, like, reincarnation on the spine.
Is that before or after we see their daughter's name tag where it's crossed out and the new girl's name is written on it?
Again, those touches not too fine.
It's kind of like hitting a tiny little nail with a sledgehammer. It's really unnecessary.
Yeah. I think there were some visual elements that you responded well to, right?
Yeah. I do like, the major marketing shot, which is Andrea Riseborough looking like she does, like forlorn and depressed, but also like the stunning beauty hidden with like very sad eyes. In dark rain at night through a window. So there's this great shape to it where there's a background behind her head, then there's kind of this middle space foreground in the car, and then on the front there's these rain droplets. It just gives a great effect to kind of feeling trapped in something, which would have been great if the film, echoed what that still image is. There's a lot of other camera flourishes I like, how it points directly into the fire, how it points into the house, or the tree house in the back of the yard as she's tearing it apart. There's this unorthodox style where they shoot it in an angle that kind of adjusts from the opposite side of the street when they're walking. That kind of gives a brooding sensation. Like, there is interesting camera work. It's just the camera work can't be interesting enough to make a bad screenplay function.
Yeah. There's some very striking drone shots that give us kind of these...
the only movie at South by Southwest with decent drone shots.
Really? I was going to say I was not a huge fan of those. They're striking. I don't know. They were a little conspicuous for my taste.
You didn't see 41 movies at South by Southwest, so you hold your tongue. I've seen 41, and I promise you, this has the best drone shots.
It is all relative, for sure.
Maybe WeWork had better, but...
There you go. It's a hot thing in docs these days. Got to get some drone shots in your documentary. Anything else?
I mean...
Our opinions are clear.
It's... as bad as it is, and as disinterested as I am in this screenwriter function of Stacey Gregg, I'm still interested in her direction. I think that she got a lot out of Riseborough. There's a lot of people that haven't. she's had a long career and she's only recently kind of risen in prominence. Her biggest role, before the last 5 years was probably something like Oblivion with Tom Cruise, Like, she's just kind of been overlooked for a long time. And so it's nice to see her used well. I don't know if that's just her overtaking Greg, or if Greg and her were collaborating, but I'm still interested in giving her a shot as a film director. I'm much less interested in screenwriter, and I want as much Riceboro as I can get. Her and Nicolas Cage, the Mandy co-stars. I just want more projects.
Yeah. I feel like you have actors and actresses that can just really burst on the scene really suddenly with a role in a prestige pick that gets them a awards nomination. And they're totally different from the kinds of actors and actresses that just slowly perfect and build their art kind of under the radar. And then I feel like suddenly people are going to realize Andrea Riseborough is one of those people, and that we should have been paying attention all along much more closely than we were.
You'll know she made it when Del Toro or Inarritu begin casting her in their projects, because then she'll get the notoriety where all of a sudden a Spielberg or a Scorsese would be like, you know what, that would be a perfect wife for a gangster.
That was Here Before.
Stacey Gregg. On to Natalie Morales' language lessons.
Estar is where you are. In a house, or in a car, or if you're happy or if you're sad. Estar can even tell you if you're mad. Pero ser. Ser is who you are. From the USA or from afar. I think some of you from Costa Rica out there. If you're skinny, fat, short, tall. Ser describes you best of all. So if you want to be a star, which word would you use? Ser o estar?
All right, Michael. This is Language Lessons, directed and written by Natalie Morales, co-written by Mark Duplass, starring Natalie Morales and Mark Duplass. What do you think?
Pretty mixed on this movie.
Wrong answer.
I know. This is shot entirely in a Zoom format. It's about Mark Duplass and Natalie
For those
Morales.
people that don't do Zoom, let's just say video meeting format.
There you go.
Webcams and shit.
Mark Duplass's character is taking Spanish language lessons from Natalie Morales' character. He's in
Carino.
LA. Carino, yes. She's in Costa Rica. They develop a friendship over the course of their class time together. They learn a little bit about each other. They make some mistakes about each other. They assume some things that turn out to not be true. I gather you liked this movie. What'd you like about it?
I mean, number one, it is charming. It is the essence of charm. When you have two immensely likable people and all they do is talk and you see their faces, as long as you don't fuck up the screenplay, it's pretty easy to like it, I think. I mean, if you have any misgivings, I imagine it's going to begin with the restrictiveness of the shooting style and the camera work and that type of thing. But I think it's a pretty effectively written screenplay. In order to put this in context, I should say that this is a film that was made entirely during COVID. It is the only film made during COVID that is video style like this that does not reference COVID, where no masks are worn, where it's just life as usual, which I think is going to give it legs that last a lot longer than any of these other stupid COVID movies that are more self-important because they're talking about the virus, whereas this is just how do we tell a human story in these constraints? And so you end up getting a story about a man who is married and has a great relationship 1 year in, and his husband buys him language lessons, and that preceding week In between classes, his husband dies, who bought him those lessons. And then the relationship between the teacher and the student, which is Mark Duplass, and the teacher is Natalie Morales, begins to get kind of complicated. At one point, he makes clear that, he's become codependent, probably. But there's a sincere humanity to their interactions. There's honesty, there's fallibility, there's just a lot in a little tiny movie. And like, there's a few great comedic moments, particularly the introduction scene where Mark Duplass freaks out and falls into the chair against the table. I don't know. This is just one of those ones that I think speaks to a filmmaker. Out of all these Zoom style or video meeting style films that have been made, this is the only one that speaks to like a real artistic voice that just happened to use these restraints to tell a story. And I'd love to see them tell a story in a different way without these constraints or different constraints.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head in describing the genius of this movie, which is that it is a pandemic movie that is not explicitly about the pandemic. And I think I totally agree that like that's what the best pandemic movies will look like, because we're just not ready for things that deal with it that explicitly without it just feeling on the nose or
and they're
overly topical.
They're all low resolution too. Like they're all bad looking movies, the ones that are about COVID.
Yeah. And I think it is very sweet. I wish I felt like there was more substance. And I think part of the problem is that I think a lot of it rings pretty hollow, especially on Mark Duplass's end. I just don't buy for a second that Mark Duplass's character has undergone the loss that he has. I don't know that this movie is quite willing enough to like let go of its surface charm and dig into the really kind of harrowing things that are in the subtext, I guess. Because it really does love the sweetness that's on the surface, and I agree that is appealing. But I feel like that death, that plot point, is just kind of an engine for sweetness rather than it is really a loss that resonates.
Okay, I think that you'd have to change the screenplay fundamentally to do what you want to do. I'm not saying you're wrong. I think that I would probably respond more positively to something like that. But the framing devices, they meet once a week. They are student-teacher. They are not super intimate to begin with, even though they Natalie Morales begins being nice, and that's reciprocated. It's still like a new relationship with someone. You're not going to overshare. You're still going to be protective. So I don't see him going to that place to reveal that stuff when the entire framing device is you meet once a week, someone that you're not familiar with, and there's only so much that you're gonna communicate in that context. So I just think that if you want more personality and you want more about the reconciliation of that day, you have to spend more time in the locality around that day, and you have to really be able to interrogate him. And that's not really what the film's about. The film's more about like two people going through a hard time, and like communicating with people that are new at some level. Like that's more about what it is.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're going to have the traumatic experiences that they undergo be part of who they are, I feel like you have to figure out a way to imply that they're really feeling that stuff deep down. Like, did you really feel like Mark Duplass's character had his husband had died? Like, I don't feel like the weight of death is in this movie at all.
Yes, the first day where she calls him back and he answers late and he's in bed. I think that's believable. I think as it continues, Mark gets a little bit out there. But, there's just certain people with personalities that, don't behave like I would behave in that situation. So it's, I don't feel confident saying that, like, that's not how someone would behave. But I think the longer it gets, the more hollow he becomes. But at some level, I think that that's the restrictiveness of having the monologue into, camera for like an hour and a half. I don't know. There's enough charm around the thing for me to overlook the fact that like this sentimentality that is sweet isn't wholly 100% grounded reality.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the thing is like, I think I'm still maybe waiting for the kind of, film that exists in the digital realm, the digital mise-en-scène or whatever we want to call it, that engages in something that feels more like realism, where you're right, this isn't really realism. This feels like a dramatization in a way, and in that does, in a way that I just don't think totally works. I think these characters just feel kind of flat to me. I mean, I just feel like I'm like, I just wish there was more depth to who these people were. I don't think the performances really imply that. There is so much surface charm, and I want more beneath the surface. And I think that's hard to do. I think that might just be one of the limitations yet to be overcome with this format, is how you really dig deep when you get one angle. You only get one angle on the person.
Mm-hmm. And how personal do people really get when they're not together?
Yeah.
Like, I guess there's some decent phone calls in cinema, but still that's building off of like a personal connection that's established in other frames. I don't know. I agree with you, but I also don't get the sense that someone could have done this better, or that this could have really been done better in the way that it's framed. And I really like the framing choices that she made, like the plot devices, quote unquote, for this screenplay. Like, I think it's really effectively decisioned. It moves pretty quickly from, problem between them to problem between them. You don't really sit for too much time without something new to kind of have to deal with their interpersonal relationship. And I think that that's a promising sign for a first-time writer-director. I think that she's only going to get better, and that's not something that I can say about most of the directorial debuts I've seen at this festival.
Yeah, I mean, it is totally like clear and lucid in its visual presentation, but like back to the idea that like we're giving it some credit for being a pandemic movie that's not explicitly about the pandemic. At the same time, I don't think anyone would look back on this and say that the surface really reflects the mood of this moment, which is a much more troubling than I think this movie is really willing to get into, and that's fine. Like, I think that's why, like, I don't hate this movie by any means. I don't know that I even dislike it, but I don't think it's very willing to let go of its sugar-coated surface to get into some of the things it's so close to like really getting into. The movie that better captures the mood of the COVID era, I think, is going to be a little bit queasier than this wants to be.
Yeah, I think that we just totally disagree on like the point of the movie, because to me it's not to be a COVID movie about the COVID moment.
Sure,
that speaks to the zeitgeist or whatever. It's just about making like a movie in these restrictions in this time, where there are restrictions. It's not about the time. It's just about getting a project made during this time. And I think that at some level, anything that's actually going to be coherent about this time will be a reflection on the time, and therefore will not actually be of the time. There's always that, infinite loop feedback where anything that truly encapsulates the time kind of can't come from the time. And anything that does come from that time that does encapsulate it won't make sense outside of the timeline of people that experienced the moment. It's this weird double dichotomy. So I'll just say that I think that for making like a positive comedy that like has some melodrama tragedy to it, I don't know. I think that you just can't do better with a tiny budget than what she did personally.
I don't think I can argue with that. I mean, I can totally let go of the pandemic lens, and you're right, just look at it on those terms. That is totally fair to just reframe how we look at it, in which case it just feels very lightweight to me.
Yes, it
in
is
that
light.
case. And just,
it's not
just
Blue
too
Jay,
lightweight for
right?
me.
I was thinking in context to Blue Jay, which is another Duplass Brothers project, where Sarah Paulson was opposite Mark Duplass, and Mark got to go to this really dark, depressive sadness, and it was really a great performance by him, mainly elevated by Paulson, who's fucking incredible. But it goes a lot deeper, and at some level that's also because it was intimate and it was building on a previous history, and I just think that this screenplay, as it was written, was never gonna go super deep. But I'm when I'm looking at this, I'm not like, I want the next Tennessee Williams. I'm looking at this and I'm like, I want like good comedy films that are fun to be directed and written by women, and this is one of the few that like is pretty like coherent. Like anybody could watch it and make sense of it, even if you never use Zoom.
But I would maybe push back about how like lighthearted of a comedy this is. Like, there are some amusing moments, but like, yeah, Mark Duplass's character loses his husband. We go much of the movie thinking that there's domestic abuse going on. Then there's a revelation about the health of one of these characters. I think it has all of these signifiers for very real, weighty things that it's not willing to engage with. And that's okay, but I think that means that it ends up feeling pretty weightless, if only because it's giving us stuff and purposefully not being willing to dissect those.
Yeah, we'll disagree. I think about,
why not make it funnier if it was a comedy? Like, why even put those things in there?
I mean, there's a lot of reasons why you do it, right? To make a coherent, quick screenplay that can be easily framed. Like, I could see like a lot of reasons to make these writing choices. I think that you're right. You're not making like the best film possible, but I think that if you're just trying to make something in like 6 months, or 3 months, or I have no idea what the shooting schedule was. This is like, let's just bust this out. This is a quick project. It feels coherent and cohesive. It doesn't feel super complex. You're right. It doesn't have like deep enriching qualities that are, about the human essence of the soul, but it does have, enough to it for, I think, it to exist in and of itself. And I think that it's a great first swing of the axe to, make a career by Natalie. I don't think you're ever going to see the Duplass brothers really make an incredible feat of cinematic structure, but I would like if they became like an unorthodox, serious comedy tone that you're not really finding anywhere else. I'm really tired of the Man from Staten Island or whatever the hell that fucking movie was last year. Like these empty vapid apatow projects that are 3 hours long that, feel like they have all this dramatic shit, but in the end, like nothing really happened. I'd rather have things be paper thin, but have a little. I found this film had more resonance than a lot of the Apatow stuff recently. So I don't know. This is just a voice that I think I'm biased towards liking. Like, I like the development of it to begin with. So everything about it, I'm seeing through a little bit of rosy colored sunglasses.
Yeah. I think we're probably approaching it from just two different standards at this point.
Yeah, you're looking at it like COVID of the times, and I'm like, new voices, comedic storytelling from independent cinema, not necessarily comedy films, but comedic storytelling at some level. This is more broad.
Yeah, I feel like I'm hearing lots of qualifiers when you say someone who just wanted to bust it out in 6 months for this lightweight.
There's tons of qualifiers in anything coming out that was shot in the last year, I think.
True. Fair enough.
Agree to disagree.
And that's language lessons.
Run! Go! Get to the chopper!
We have to go.
I'm coming with you.
That was brilliant.
You're the best and we love you!
And that's another one in the can.